Exodus chapter 16 for January 27, 2021. Here we'll be introduced to something called manna and to some quail. Verse 1. Then they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the sons of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departure from the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The sons of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." So the Israelites had now been traveling for about a month and a half, and their food reserves that they had brought with them from Egypt were running out. What do? They immediately began to complain that Moses and Aaron had brought them out into the desert of Sin, it's pronounced Sin, just to die of starvation. They had witnessed the 10 plagues the Lord had put Egypt through, and they had seen how the Lord had miraculously destroyed the Egyptian military, yet they blamed Moses and Aaron. Who had delivered them from Egypt twice through great miracles? It certainly wasn't Moses and Aaron. The Lord had done this. Still, they could not bring themselves to believe that the Lord would continue to take care of them, even though he had promised this. They argued that they had plenty of food, pots of meat and bread, when they were in Egypt. Really? They were slaves, being tormented horribly by their Egyptian taskmasters. How quickly can we forget our blessings when we encounter new trials? Verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether or not they will walk in my instruction. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily." So Moses and Aaron said to all the sons of Israel, "At evening you will know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your grumbling against the Lord. And what are we that you grumble against us?" The Lord explains to Moses that he will feed his people to test whether they will follow his directions or not. They need to learn obedience. The Israelites' faith was very weak at this time. They had been exposed to worship of the Egyptian gods for over 300 years, and many of them now believed in these gods. So their remembrance of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was just about gone. Even the great miracles the Lord had used to rescue, or more correctly, redeem them out of Egypt, had not overcome their entanglement with Egyptian religion. Moses and Aaron explained that the Lord would bring food to them, and that very evening that they would find more food from him in the next morning. All of this was to show them that their Lord was still watching over them. Moses and Aaron also posed a question to him. "Why are you complaining to us? We're just following what the Lord has been directing us to do." The Israelites were still putting their faith in Moses instead of the Lord, just as some believers today will put their faith in a favorite Christian leader rather than trusting God first. Verse 8. Moses said, "This will happen when the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening and bread to the full in the morning. For the Lord hears your grumblings, which you grumble against him." And what are we? Your grumblings aren't against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, 'Come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumblings.'" It came about, as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the sons of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. Moses elaborates a bit in verse 8, pointing out that the Israelites were really grumbling against the Lord, Jehovah. Aaron then orders the people to gather around to hear what the Lord has to say. While they were gathered around Moses and Aaron, they saw the Shekinah glory grow much brighter in the cloud. This was a direct show of who they were really complaining against. It was the Lord. And starting in verse 11, the Lord begins to explain what will transpire that evening and the next morning. Verse 11, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the grumblings of the sons of Israel. Speak to them, saying, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. So it came about at evening that quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. So what are these quails? This was a quail, Coturnix coturnix. You can look it up, but I'll show you a picture in a moment. That migrates in extremely large flocks from North Africa up through Palestine and Syria, on up into Europe, and eastward over into Western Asia. Even today, people in Gaza will wait at evening and dawn in the spring for these huge flocks to come flying close to the ground so that they can be caught in hand nets. They can also knock them out of the ground, knock them out of the sky, rather, just by using sticks. The Israelites hear that they will find plenty of bread in the morning, and that, plus the quails, will show them that the Lord is their God and will take care of them. In verse 4, he had told them that he would rain bread from heaven. Bread here is a Hebrew lechem, refers to food in general in this context. The Lord's trying to teach them to trust in him and not in Moses. They were still saying that it was Moses who led them out of Egypt, since they could see him standing there, while the Lord was less tangible. But what about that blazing cloud that they were following? That evening, a huge flock of quail swept through the camps of the Israelites, so they were able to gather plenty of meat for their family. Next morning, they found a layer of dew on the ground and noticed something strange was on it. The problem of their grumbling has now been repeated in verses 4, 8, and 11 by both Moses and the Lord intends to do something about this. Here's our quail here, the common quail, scientific name Coturnix coturnix. As you can see, it's a small bird, about 6 to 7 inches long, with a wingspan maybe 13, 14 inches. It's found through much of North Africa, the Middle East, Southern Europe, and Western Asia. As you can see, it's quite similar to our bobwhite quail, although they're not the same bird. Verse 14, when the layer of dew evaporated, behold, on the surface of the wilderness there was a fine flake-like thing, fine as the frost on the ground. When the sons of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, it is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. As the dew evaporated, small white things were left on the ground. Manna, which is Hebrew manhu, does not mean what is it. I've known there are preachers who teach that, but it's not correct. That's not how you say what is it in Hebrew. The root word here is man, which refers to a gift, so they recognize this as a gift from God. Moses explains that this is the bread that the Lord had given to him, and this is what Jesus referred to in John 6:32 through 6:35. Jesus then said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread out of heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread out of heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. Then they said to him, Lord, always give us this bread. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst. Oh, what a wonderful promise. Verse 16, this is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it every man as much as he should eat. You shall take an omer apiece, according to the number of persons each of you has in his tent. The sons of Israel did so, and some gathered much, and some little. When they measured it with an omer, he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who had gathered little had no lack. Every man gathered as much as he should eat. Moses said to them, let no man leave any of it until morning. But they did not listen to Moses, and some left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and became foul. And Moses was angry with them. They gathered it morning by morning, every man as much as he should eat. But when the sun grew hot, it would melt. So the Lord gave Moses explicit directions on how to gather and use the manna. They have to learn obedience here, and you see, and they're hard-headed. They still want to do it their way. Each man would gather an omer, each for himself and his family. This way, some gathered a lot, while others gathered less, but when all had been combined and measured out, they found that everyone had received the same amount with nothing left over. They were not to save any of it for the next day, but some didn't obey, and they discovered that the remainder had rotted in worms, which might have been insect larvae, perhaps maggots, that hatched out. Blah. They noticed that any manna left ungathered disintegrated as the day grew hot. Verse 22. Now on the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each person. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, then he said to them, this is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is a Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning. So they put it aside until morning as Moses had ordered, and it did not become foul, nor was there any worm in it. Moses said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will be none. They were instructed to gather twice as much per person, 2 omers each, so they would have enough for observing the Sabbath. After what had happened to the remainder earlier, which had rotted, this must have raised some eyebrows. They were, oh, well, boy, they tried that, and it goofed up and it got bad. Again, they're being tested to see if they would trust the Lord and not just try to go their own way. And with this testing, our Lord does this to us also. Just like the Israelites, we sometimes flunk the test. The Lord was trying to teach them obedience, which was to become of supreme importance when they were given the law. They're going to have to obey that law, which is much more than the simple instructions they're getting here. This time, when they put aside the extra manna, it didn't rot the next day. There were no worms in it. It still tasted great. This behavior of the manna was miraculous from start to finish. It did not follow any normal pattern of nature and in fact violated natural law. There have been attempts to say that certain things that you find in the Middle East today, the sap of certain bushes and trees and things might have been manna. First of all, those are on bushes and trees, not on the ground. It is totally miraculous. We don't need to look for natural reasons for this. Verse 27. It came about on the 7th day that some of the people went out together, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, he gives you bread for 2 days on the 6th day. Remain every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day. Once again, some people didn't listen to Moses' directions. We call this selective hearing, when we only hear what we want to hear. They only heard what they wanted to hear and ignored the details here. Just maybe there would be some manna laying around on the morning of the Sabbath, but there wasn't. The Lord challenged Moses about refusing to follow his commandments and instructions. So why did God challenge Moses? He did what he was told. The people didn't. Moses was their leader and had the responsibility of making sure that they obeyed the Lord. Okay, Moses gets really upset, and he locks everybody down in a sort of house arrest. They're to remain in their tents all day on the Sabbath, and nobody was to go out for anything. Now this going out, not going out for anything was relaxed later on, but this Moses lost his temper and needed everybody stay in your tent all day long and deal with it. But later, as a result of this, some literalist members of the Jews in Jesus' day would stay all day in the position they woke up in on the morning of the Sabbath. This was another example of just how far some went with works in order to please God. The problem was, and still is, that God is not much amused by such ridiculously literal behavior. God is not pleased by our efforts to merit favor with him. Verse 31. The house of Israel named it manna, and it was like coriander seed, white, and its taste was like wafers with honey. Then Moses said, This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer full of it be kept throughout your generations, that they may see the bread that I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. Moses said to Aaron, Take a jar and put an omer full of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept. The sons of Israel ate the manna 40 years, until they came to an inhabited land. They ate the manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. Now, an omer is 1/10 of an ephah. The Israelites gave the odd bread the name manna or manhu. It is described here like coriander seed in color and general appearance, and tasted like wafers with honey. The omer, this was about 2 to 2.5 quarts in volume. They were to keep an omer of it in a jar before the Lord throughout their generations. That would have been in the tabernacle, which hasn't been built yet. Later, Israel switched to using the ephah, which equaled 20 dry quarts. The bath was the liquid equivalent to the ephah. The ephah was for dry measure. These verses are thought to be editorial comments added later by Moses to explain what they would be directed to do with the Ark of the Covenant at Mount Sinai, also known as Mount Horeb. Some argue that this was added later by another person, one of the prophets, Ezra, who knows. But I see no problem with Moses himself going back and editing his own writing. The Israelites continued to eat manna for almost 40 years until they crossed over the Jordan River into the Promised Land.